There exists a box, small, wooden, but inside it is something ancient, something restless. It is an object so dangerous it's been locked away, buried, sealed in glass. They call it the Dybbuk Box, an item cursed by a malevolent spirit from Jewish folklore. Not everyone believes in it, but those who've owned it, they stop sleeping, they stop laughing. Some stop living. This is the true story of a box that was never meant to be opened. But someone did, and everything changed. It all begins in 2001, when Kevin Mannis, a writer and antique shop owner, stepped into a dimly lit house in Portland, Oregon. This was the home of a 103-year-old Holocaust survivor who had recently passed away. Kevin moves through the house, his footsteps soft on the dust-covered carpets. He runs his hand across weathered furniture, scanning for something worth restoring. Then, he sees it. Nestled quietly among a cluster of forgotten things was a small wooden cabinet, about the size of a shoebox. Its surface was worn smooth, carved with strange looping symbols that Kevin didn't recognize. It looked old, really old. And yet, somehow it stood out, like it had been waiting for him. Kevin couldn't look away. It wasn't just curiosity. Something about the box was drawing him in, like it wanted to be found. Without thinking, he picks it up. The moment Kevin lifted the box, the air shifts. At first, it smells floral, like traces of jasmine and lavender, as if an old perfume bottle had just been opened. But then, something darker creeps in. A rancid, nauseating smell fills the air. It's the unmistakable stench of decay, of something long forgotten, rotting away. Curious, Kevin glances over at the elderly woman running the sale and asks about the box. But when she sees what he's holding, her face drains of color. Her lips tighten and her hands shake ever so slightly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she says,
"You do not want that box. Please leave it here."
Kevin chuckles, assuming she's joking, but she isn't smiling. Instead, she locks eyes with him and says something even more unsettling.
"It has a Dybbuk inside."
In Jewish folklore, a Dybbuk isn't just a ghost, it's worse. A Dybbuk is a malevolent spirit, a restless soul that attaches itself to a person. It follows them, torments them, and sometimes it possesses them. The woman explains that the box belonged to her grandmother, a Holocaust survivor. Before she fled Poland, she and a group of women sealed something inside this box, something they swore should never be released. The last thing they said before sealing it shut was, "Never open it." Most people would hear that and immediately put the box down. But Kevin wasn't like most people. He's a businessman, and to him, this is just another antique. He ignores the warning, pays for the box, and leaves. Little does he know, he's just made the worst mistake of his life. Back at his antique shop, Kevin places the box on an old wooden workbench in the basement. To him, it's just another strange item, likely a wine cabinet, nothing more. But still, something about it nags at him. The woman's warning, the unsettling scent, the weight of it in his hands, it all lingers in his mind. Unable to shake his curiosity, he picks up a screwdriver and carefully wedges it into the seam, prying at the latch. Then, with a soft click, the box opens. The moment it pops open, a gust of cold air rushes out, as if the box itself had been holding its breath. The air feels wrong, thick, unnatural, like something had been sealed inside and just escaped. Kevin peers inside, and his stomach tightens. The contents are strange, almost ritualistic. 2 pennies, a tiny golden goblet, a brittle rosebud, a candle holder, and then, the most unsettling thing of all, a lock of hair bound tightly with string. At the bottom of the box, scorched into the wood, is a series of Hebrew inscriptions. The letters look burned in, not carved, not painted, as if someone had seared them into the surface with fire. Then, the scent hits him again, but now it's suffocating, clawing at his throat, and beneath it, the unmistakable stench of something rotting. To Kevin, the box still seemed like little more than a strange collection of random trinkets. He closes it, shoves it aside, and heads upstairs, dismissing it as just another oddity. But the Dybbuk Box wasn't done with him yet. The next morning, Kevin left the shop to run errands, leaving his employee, Jane, in charge. She heads down to the basement, flicking on the light. The fluorescent bulb sputtered to life, casting weak, flickering shadows against the walls. She's been here countless times before, but today, something feels off. The air is thick, almost suffocating, heavy with an unnatural stillness that makes her skin crawl. As she moves through the cluttered space, reaching for supplies, she suddenly freezes. At first, it's just a whisper of a feeling, barely noticeable. But with each passing second, it intensifies. Suddenly, there's a loud crash behind her. She turns around and sees a broom lying on the floor. Before she can process what's happening, a fluorescent light bulb shatters nearby. Her heart starts racing as she heads for the stairs, but then a wooden chair flies off a shelf and lands right in front of her, blocking her path. Panic surges through her as she realizes she isn't alone. Jane's scream rips through the air as she bolts for the stairs. But when she reaches the top, she freezes. The metal gate is locked. She never locked it. Heart hammering, she grabs her phone. She calls Kevin, but before she can explain, the call cuts out. When Kevin returns, he finds Jane pale and trembling. The basement is a mess. Boxes overturned, furniture scattered, but no sign of an intruder. Despite the inexplicable nature of the events, Kevin dismissed Jane's fears, accusing her of causing the mess and overreacting. But what Kevin failed to realize was that this was only the beginning. A few days later, Kevin's mother visited the antique shop for her birthday lunch. As she arrived, Kevin handed her a wrapped gift, the Dybbuk Box. Before he could explain what it is, the phone rings. He hesitates, then gestures for her to open it while he steps away to take the call. Left alone, she peels away the wrapping, lifting the lid. And instantly, her breath catches in her throat. And then, she collapses. Kevin hears a heavy thud from the next room, and a chill runs through him. Heart racing, he rushes back and stops in his tracks. His mother is collapsed on the floor, completely still. Her eyes are wide with terror, darting between Kevin and the Dybbuk Box resting nearby. Her mouth opens slightly, as if she's trying to speak, but no sound comes out. Panic rising, Kevin fumbles for his phone and calls 911, barely able to string a sentence together. Within minutes, paramedics burst into the shop, their urgent movements filling the space. As they tend to Kevin's mother, she stirs ever so slightly, her fingers twitching, faint gasp escaping her lips, but still no words. Only her eyes remain focused and full of warning. Slowly, she turns her gaze back to the box, then back to Kevin. With great effort, she whispers just loud enough to be heard, "Get rid of it!" But Kevin doesn't hear her. All he sees is his mother slipping away. Shaken by his mother's collapse, Kevin makes a decision. The box has to go. Days later, a young couple visits the shop. The woman notices the Dybbuk Box almost immediately. Something about it catches her attention. She asks if it's for sale. Kevin gives her a price, and without much discussion, they buy it. As they walked out the door, Kevin feels a strange sense of relief, like a weight's been lifted off his shoulders. Finally, he says to himself, it's not my problem anymore. But it was. 3 days later, the front door creaks open. Kevin walks out from the back, expecting to see a customer. But instead, he sees it. Sitting on the counter, exactly where it used to be, is the Dybbuk box. It looks untouched, like it never left. But now, there's a note taped to the top. The handwriting is rushed and uneven. It reads, "This has an odd darkness about it." Kevin doesn't move. He just stares at it. Whoever brought it back didn't ask for a refund. They didn't explain anything. They simply returned it, quietly, as if they were afraid to speak about it. Kevin doesn't want it in the shop anymore, doesn't even want to be near it. So he takes it home and locks it in his personal storage room. That night, exhausted, he falls asleep, but his sleep is anything but peaceful. Kevin finds himself in a dream, walking through a serene courtyard. The air is still, calm. He's holding the hand of someone he trusts, feeling safe. But suddenly, the person starts to pull away. He tries to hold on, but his body is paralyzed. He can't speak, can't move, as the person slips away, vanishing into the shadows. Then, at the far end of the courtyard, he sees it. A tall, shadowy figure. It's motionless, its body just a dark, shifting mass. Its face is horribly wrong, empty, hollow eyes, and a twisted, unnatural grin. And then, it starts to move. Slowly at first, then faster, until it's charging straight at him. The figure grabs his face, and Kevin can feel it tearing pieces of his skin away, pulling him into the darkness. Kevin jolts awake, his breath ragged. His body trembles, drenched in sweat. It was just a dream. But why does his face still burn? Why does his skin feel like it's been torn? He stumbles to the bathroom, flips on the light, and his stomach drops. Dark bruises spread across his shoulders, deep, ugly, purplish marks that weren't there before he slept. His hands shake as he touches them, wincing at pain. The next night, it happens again. More bruises, red streaks across his neck as if something had grabbed him. That's when it hits him. The Dybbuk box isn't just haunting his dreams, it's marking him. And if he doesn't get rid of it soon, he might not wake up at all. Gripped by fear and desperation, Kevin goes straight to his computer and lists the box on eBay. He has to get rid of it, no matter what. Thousands of miles away in Missouri, two college students, Sam and Brian, are up late, scrolling through eBay in search of their next creepy find. They've already collected Ouija boards, haunted dolls, anything weird with a good story. But tonight, they stumble across something different, a small antique wooden box with strange markings. The description is vague, but one line stands out: "Do not open." Sam sees it as a challenge and clicks "Buy now" without hesitation. A few days later, the box arrives, wrapped in layers of newspaper, packed tightly inside a plain cardboard box. No instructions, no note, just the box itself. They unbox it in the middle of their living room, laughing nervously, half expecting it to do something the moment they set it down. But nothing happens. So they place it on a shelf next to the rest of their collection and forget about it. For the first 2 weeks, the Dybbuk box just sits there. No strange sounds, no movement, nothing at all. It's like whatever was inside went silent. But then, things start to break. Sam's laptop shuts down without warning. No matter what he tries, it won't turn back on. When they check, they discover the hard drive is completely fried. A day later, Brian's Xbox stops working too. It won't power on, just completely dead. Then it gets stranger. Their watches stop ticking, all of them frozen at random times. And even their toaster starts acting up, burning everything they put in it, even on the lowest setting. Then the light bulbs in the apartment begin to burst. They replace the bulbs, but the same thing happens again and again. At night, they start hearing faint knocking, like someone was tapping on their walls or furniture. First, they thought it was just the house settling, but the knocks grew louder, more insistent. and they seem to be coming from the direction of the Dybbuk box. No matter where they moved it in the apartment, the sounds followed. Then came the insects. It starts with just a few, strange beetles creeping along the floor, but within days, their apartment is infested. Bugs pour from the vents, spill from the drains, crawl from cracks in the walls. And the worst part? They aren't running away. They are crawling toward the box, as if something inside is calling to them. And then the nightmares start. Sam can't sleep without waking up in cold sweats, feeling like something is lurking in the room with him. He starts hearing whispers, faint voices. Sometimes they sound like a woman crying or pleading. Other times, they sound like frantic whispers in a language he doesn't understand. Brian, too, starts having dreams. He dreams of an old woman with hollow eyes, staring at him, warning him to get rid of the box. The more time passes, the more vivid and terrifying these dreams become. One night, Brian wakes up to find his sheets tangled around him, his body pinned to the bed as though something is holding him down. The connection between the Dybbuk box and the strange occurrences becomes impossible to ignore. But despite the mounting fear, neither Sam nor Brian can bring themselves to get rid of it. Instead, Sam starts a blog to document every chilling event. The posts quickly go viral, and soon whispers about the cursed box spread across campus. But the longer they kept it, the worse things got. Sam notices strands of hair on his pillow at first, then clumps. His reflection grows thinner, weaker. He feels drained, exhausted. And then he sees her, the shadowy figure in the corner of his vision, an old woman hunched and silent. When he spins around to look, she vanishes. But the moment he looks away, she's there again, always watching. The stress becomes unbearable. Sam can't sleep. Brian refuses to be alone in the apartment. Whatever attention the blog brought, it's no longer worth it. They need to get rid of the box. Sam opens his laptop, pulls up eBay, and starts typing out the listing. His hand hovers over the submit button for a long moment. But he clicks it. Within minutes, the box is sold. The buyer? A museum director named Jason, someone who had been following their blog from the beginning. He wanted the Dybbuk box for his private collection. When the package arrives, Jason examines the box. The wood is old, worn, but something catches his eye. Melted wax, hardened along the edges, and a ritual seal. Someone tried to keep this thing closed. Ignoring the unease creeping up his spine, he pries it open, half expecting something supernatural. But nothing happens. No sudden gust of wind, no eerie whispers, just silence. Disappointed, he dismisses it as a hoax and sets the box on a spare desk, thinking it might make for an interesting office story. The next day, Jason gathers his colleagues around, grinning as he tells them about the Dybbuk box's dark past. The illnesses, the infestations, the strokes. Then the lights start bursting, one by one. Computers crash beyond repair. Phones refuse to turn on. Employees complain of splitting headaches, fevers, nausea. That night, Jason goes to bed as usual and falls asleep. But just a few hours later, he wakes up suddenly, unable to move his body. He can only move his eyes. Then he hears it. Slow, heavy footsteps. Someone is climbing the stairs, getting closer. His heart pounds as he stares at the open bedroom door, barely able to see the landing outside. He holds his breath, straining to make out who or what is coming. From the corner of his eye, he sees a figure step into the room. His pulse spikes. It's not someone he knows. It's an old woman, her head draped in a shawl, her face hidden. She moves closer, shuffling toward him. Then, without warning, she turns and locks eyes with Jason. In an instant, she darts around the bed, leans over him, and drives her fingers into his eyes. Jason screams, waking up in a panic. His wife shakes him, saying it was just a dream, but it felt terrifyingly real. The next morning, Jason stumbles into the bathroom, still shaken. He flips on the light, then freezes. His reflection stares back, but his eyes, they're bloodshot. The whites are streaked with red, like burst capillaries beneath the skin. It looks like someone had raked their fingers across them in the night. He starts to believe the Dybbuk box is truly cursed, recalling the warnings from previous owners. That evening, Jason leaves the Dybbuk box locked in his truck outside. As he relaxes in the TV room with his son, the boy suddenly points behind him, eyes wide with fear. Jason turns and freezes. A shadowy woman stands in the room. The same figure from his nightmares. The one who had gouged out his eyes in his dreams. Before he can react, she vanishes. His son, terrified, asks who she was. Jason doesn't answer. He grabs his son, calls for his wife, and insists they leave the house immediately. Jason finally tells them everything. The Dybbuk box, the nightmares, and now the horrifying reality of the figure appearing in their home. His wife is shaken, his son silent with fear. They can't just throw the box away and risk someone else finding it. Instead, Jason decides to lock it in their abandoned rental property outside of town. The house sits in the middle of nowhere. No neighbors, no traffic, nothing but empty fields. When Jason arrives, he pulls the Dybbuk box from his truck. It feels heavier than before, warmer, almost alive. He carries it inside, heading straight for the basement. The air is thick, damp, heavy with something he can't explain. He lowers the box into a military-grade container, slamming the lid shut, sealing it away. And for the first time, Jason wonders if this is truly over. The strange occurrences, the accidents, the overwhelming dread, all of it stopped. It was as if the box had finally been silenced. Then, in 2018, someone dared to wake it up. Paranormal investigator Zak Bagans, host of Ghost Adventures, acquired the Dybbuk box. Unlike those before him, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't trying to hide it or lock it away. He wanted to open it. And so, with camera rolling, an entire crew watching, he did. The second the lid cracked open, something changed. Zak's face twisted in pain. His body jerked forward as if something had just slammed into him. His vision blurred, his chest tightened, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he couldn't breathe at all. The room went still. Zak's crew, just moments ago, curious, skeptical, now stood frozen. Their faces had changed. Intrigue had turned to fear. One of the people standing in that room was rapper Post Malone. He hadn't planned on interacting with the Dybbuk box, but in a moment of curiosity, or maybe fate, he reached out and touched Zak's shoulder. A simple, fleeting connection. And yet, that was enough. Within weeks, Post Malone's life took a terrifying turn. First, his private jet suffered a catastrophic malfunction mid-flight. Both tires blew out, forcing an emergency landing that could have ended in disaster. Then, just days later, he was involved in a serious car accident. His Rolls-Royce completely totaled in a violent high-speed crash. And as if that wasn't enough, his home was invaded by armed burglars. A coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the Dybbuk box had chosen a new victim. Today, the Dybbuk box sits behind glass in Zak Bagans' haunted museum, sealed but still waiting. Would you dare to open the Dybbuk box? Or would you leave it sealed forever? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling tales of the unexplained. Because some mysteries are better left unsolved.